I want to drive home a little more forcefully how important circadian rhythms are. So, we bring up circadian rhythms quite a bit on this podcast. I've had people on, I've had an expert, Dr. Martin Moore-Eid, and just feel like people aren't really getting how important this is. And I don't know why. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I think it's a process. It took me a while to really start to take this seriously and change things in my life to make sure I was supporting my circadian rhythms, like completely supporting my circadian rhythms. So before I go into it, I just want to tell you about some things that are going on at the Nourished Soul and also invite you to a free class that is coming up in May. So if you're listening to this before May of 2024, I would love for you to come. Well, you can, as long as I'm having free classes, you can come, but there is a class on mitochondria and mood. So almost always I'm talking about something related to mood, but in kind of a new, interesting way. So we're going to be talking about what healthy mitochondria have to do with mood in that class. And I also have courses, and I am really proud of these courses. I have a stress management course. It's really about stress resilience, becoming more stress resilient. It's a 21-day reset. Would love for you to check that out. And I also have a food mood course. And those are self-paced courses that you can take. So I would love for you to hop off of this when you finish listening, go over and check out what we've got going on at the Nourished Soul. We have a free quiz right now that you can take on that homepage. So lots of things that you could poke around and see for free. And then also check out the courses. And if you decide to take a course, you can use the discount code podcast and get 20% off. All right, enough of the kind of commercially kind of stuff, but I just am so proud of it. I want to make sure everybody knows to come visit and at least take advantage of the free stuff, right? All right, so let's talk about circadian rhythms because I watch people make small changes that I think are amazing for them. There are big shifts in their digestion and even their blood pressure and their health in general just by making some of these small changes that support their circadian rhythms. But then I watch how people don't fully get it, how important this is. So, circadian rhythms are the physical, mental, and behavioral changes that an organism goes through in a 24-hour cycle. So, we are day dwellers, diurnal beings. Humans are diurnal beings. Now, sometimes people will kind of argue about this and say, well, I'm a night owl. I used to think that I was a night owl too. I just like to do things after the sun goes down. I totally get that. But we are actually day dwellers. And when you start making some shifts in your life to support your circadian rhythms, that's when you start to see a lot of improvements. Why? Because hear me, people, the circadian rhythms are influencing almost every single process in the body. Like all the functions that you have going on in your body, those are influenced by circadian rhythms. And get this, not only is that important, not only is that you have the master clock in your brain, which is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's what Dr. Martin Moore-Eid was on the show, and he talked all about that. That's the Harvard guy that was over the lab that found the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So go check that out if you want. But what I'm telling you is that we also have almost every cell in your body has its own clock. And so all of these different things that need to happen, like when to make which hormones, when to release those hormones, when to make which neurotransmitters, and when to release those, like all these different functions that are so important to our body. I'm, of course, most interested in how it affects our mood. But what influences the circadian rhythms? Like, what does this mean? How do we make sure that we are really optimizing our life and our circadian rhythms so that we are functioning at optimal levels, right? Because if you've got some health concerns, Having your circadian rhythms off, when everything is off, then it will exacerbate the problems that you already have, like an existing health problem. But this is also, there is really good research that directly links obesity, diabetes, mood disorders, blood pressure issues, cancer. Like, come on, people. We have to know this. And if you don't want to know it for yourself, which I think you probably do if you're listening to the Nourish Soul podcast, you're interested in helping yourself feel as good as you can. But for goodness sake, can we please help our children? We have got to get this as a society, as humanity has got to understand that this is the biggest crisis that we face. Well, one of the biggest crises that we face at this point is the fact that we are now literally attached to our technology. We have all of these lights on, the lights from our in our on our cars. So headlights are now different. Overhead lighting is now different than it was even in the 90s, or even sooner than that. But we're talking, most of that, well, my generation, we were teenagers in the 80s, growing up in the late 70s, well, 70s, 80s, and 90s, okay? Wherever you are, maybe you were before that, maybe you were after that, it doesn't really matter. We did not have technology literally on our bodies 24/7 that were affecting our systems. So, the old school way of being a role model for your kids and being a healthy citizen, exercise, eating well, maybe you did some meditation, like all of that is still great. I'm telling you, it is not enough. It is not enough to fully reverse what we have going on now with our health issues. And gut health, I used to teach gut health in 2016. I started teaching gut health and I always kept talking about the food. And yes, I was one of those people talking about the probiotics and the prebiotics. But you've heard me say on this show, and I will say it again and again and again, gut health is a circadian health issue. So if you have gut health, digestive health problems, that is a circadian rhythms issue. I would also add it's probably mitochondrial health, but we're talking about specifically circadian rhythms today. So I will, try to stay on track here. So, okay, what are the inputs? What influences the circadian rhythms? Because we can see how much these circadian rhythms influence everything else that's going on in our bodies. But what do we do? Okay, how do we make sure? Just in case this hasn't been super clear in the other episodes that I've done with people talking about circadian rhythms, I want to make it crystal clear. Okay, so light and dark is one of the biggest inputs, right? That's one of the biggest influences influencing our circadian rhythms. But I just suddenly I was remembering, I don't want you to think about this just in terms of sleep, people. This is not just about jet lag and crappy sleep, even though those are really important. And yes, circadian rhythms, that's when people tend to think about their circadian rhythms, but it's so much more than just light and dark and sleep. Okay. So other inputs are even the temperature outside, the temperature inside, the temperature that you're in is an influence. The timing of your eating. So food, taking in food is an influencer. What else? Stress is also, but when we actually get physical exercise is also an input. Temperature, eating, physical exercise, stress, what am I missing? When we're social, also, because there are certain times of the day that we're designed to be more social. Now, people will say, what about individual differences? What's really interesting about this is that there does not seem to be much nuance in terms of light and dark. We are diurnal beings, and there's anyone who's a little bit off is off by maybe an hour. So we're talking about 23 hours versus 24 or 23 and a half. It's not a big difference here. But where I do see nuances is in the time and of day of being social, of our when we eat can be a little bit, people can be nuanced around when is the best time of day for them to eat and when to be social and when to be active. We know that stress is a big influence on our lives. And so there are times actually for eustress, EUSTRES, eustress, which is actually considered healthy stress, where we would, it's a good stress that's actually pushing us to a better place, more health. And we can feel that within a day. We are designed to feel that. We're designed to ride the waves, the rhythms of our natural cycles of the day. We have our own individual rhythms, but then we also collectively have rhythms. So when you just look at the research and you say, okay, well, let's design a day. I have videos, I have information about this. I have Designing Your Perfect Circadian Day. I think it says Perfect Quantum Day or something like that on YouTube. So this is what I teach in my courses. So if you're like, I need to go deeper into this, get into a course. I go really deep into all of this. I talk about cortisol and melatonin. I talk about all kinds of things. But just for this, for the purposes of the podcast and today, I just want to drive home how important it is for you to figure out how to support your circadian rhythms. And from a research standpoint, the timing of honoring the light and honoring the dark. So, doing what we do by being more active and all the things that we need to get done, really seeing if you can get that done during daylight hours and then be more protective about dark when it is dark outside. I don't think it's just about not getting enough natural light, even though I'm reading more and more lately about how important and that is the primary problem that we're all facing right now, is the fact that we're not getting enough natural light during the day. And there are ways to do this. There are, if you're a teacher, you can figure out how to turn off, if you are in a room where you can do natural lights or light bulbs that are better for everybody. People can wear blue blockers, but we need to really understand that it's also about this honoring the dark. And I think a lot of people miss this piece, right? Because we're up in the dark to get ready for work or school or whatever we do. When there's time changes, it can really mess with everybody. But we're not realizing that we need to take protective measures to honor that dark. And if we have to be up in the dark, to not be on our devices that have this sharp blue light, to use protective screens, to make our, our phones red after sunset, that kind of thing. And using blue blocking glasses can also be very helpful. But I want to just drive home this piece too, because people understand, oh, the technology is not good for me. Having a blue light in my face is telling my body that it is noon in the middle of summer in Florida. So if it's not noon in the middle of summer in Florida, then you don't want to be having a device in your face. Now, being on a device kind of all day, there are things we can do with yellow lens blue blocking glasses. That can be helpful. Cracking a window if you're next to a window, cracking windows when we're driving, like all of that to try and let in more natural light for us. And we have sensors in our eyes and on our skin. And there are ways to do this safely. And you want to do that safely and you want to build your solar callus and do that slowly. There's no rush in it. The only rush is to get started and to start really understanding that your circadian rhythms are affecting every function in your body. So quit taking that lightly. If you're also complaining about things, if you're complaining about your weight or your mood or any kind of health problems that you might have, digestive stuff, understand that you've got to support your circadian rhythms. Yes, of course, I'm all into the food and nutrition and exercise and eating well. I'm just telling you, I don't think that's enough anymore. That may have been fine in the 80s and 90s when all of us were learning all the, it's fine. It's not enough. And maybe it wasn't enough then either, but we've had so many changes to our lighting environment and to our technology that we can no longer really ignore this. This is going to be a crisis if for our kids and our kids' kids if we don't get this figured out. So, it's not just me, people. All right. So in 2017, circadian rhythms won a Nobel Prize. Well, actually, Hall Rosbash, I think it is, and Young won a Nobel Prize for their work in circadian rhythms. So this is not hard to find. There are thousands of research articles on circadian rhythms since the early 70s, because before that people didn't really think circadian rhythms were even a real thing and didn't know. But it's not catching up, and I can't quite figure out why it's not catching up. Why everyday people, like, why this isn't information that all of us know and that we're taking this really seriously. So, the dopamine thing is a real problem too. So, I would just want to focus on our catecholamines for just a second, okay? So, yes, all the functions in the body, the clocks in the body really important for all the functions, but I just wanted to point out that blue light in particular, junk blue light, not the blue light. So we need the whole spectrum of light that's available outside when it's light outside. And there is the whole spectrum, Roy G. Biv, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, Biv, blue, indigo, violet. All of those, the colors that you would see if you held up a crystal prism, the whole, all those colors, right? That's what we want, all of those colors when it's outside. When we're on devices, we have a sharp blue. Blue light is inflammatory, red light, anti inflammatory. That's why I'm a big fan of red light therapy. But also, red light is available for free outside from dawn to dusk. And there's a high concentration of infrared and red. Infrared, you can't see that, but it's really helpful for diversifying our gut microbiome. It's really helpful for our mitochondria, very helpful in terms of anti inflammatory. And it's high concentrations at sunrise and sunset. So, of course, that's why I'm always telling everybody, get out for early morning light. Get out in the evenings for some light if you can. But then this junk blue light that's on all of our devices, that is lowering your dopamine, people. So our catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, that is the get up and go, the motivation, feeling energized. Now, energy has a lot to do with our mitochondrial health, for sure. But circadian rhythms have a lot to do with supporting our mitochondrial health. It's all connected. So these frequencies of light, they hold information. And that information is then code to your body to tell your body what season you're in, what time of day it is, and what functions it needs to perform at this particular time. So if that's all jacked up, you gonna be all jacked up and then complaining like it's not a big deal. And we all act like it's not a big deal. And it is a big deal. And if you don't think it's a big deal for you, okay, fine. But for God's sakes, please help your children. And I know I can't help my children either. I'm like, wear your blue blockers, wear your blue blockers. They're like, oh my God, you're so crazy, mom. So there's only so much we can do, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I get that. But if you're complaining about focus and mood and motivation, like this is all related to your catecholamines, your dopamine, right? And so, yeah, we're getting a dopamine hit when we're like scrolling, but you've got to understand that you're depleting your body, your battery that is your body is getting depleted. You are losing energy faster than you're able to make it because the inputs are not there, or the inputs are limited compared to what is sucking the life out of all of us at this moment in time, this particular time that we're in. And I know there are a lot of really heavy, hard things going on in our world. I get that. And I don't want to, say that I don't want to overlook that or act like that's not a thing. It absolutely is. But when I get overwhelmed by all the stuff that's happening in our world, I think, okay, well, how can I be of service? How can I be a help in the world? And the best thing that I believe we can do is be a light in the light that you already are. Be that and shine brightly in the world. You are not going to be able to shine very brightly if the light that you make inside of you, inside of your cells, can't get going, is struggling because your mitochondria are struggling and you're losing all this energy because you're not actually restoring your body because we're all ignoring the fact that we have this really important system that's like an orchestra in the body that's orchestrated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which is a part of your hypothalamus. It's a really important little spot in the brain. Yeah, and I get really passionate about this because I see people interested. I see people kind of sort of maybe doing some things. And yeah, it's not the only thing that we need to be doing, for sure, but it's a really big, important one, and it's not that hard. It's not nearly as hard as some of the other things that we might be asked to do in the name of health for our bodies, minds, and our souls. Okay, so I'm just looking at some of my notes to make sure that I've covered stuff. I feel like I'm been a little more forceful with this one. I guess because I'm really passionate about it, but still, I don't understand why we're not taking this more seriously. Because once you understand how important this is, you do the things that you need to do to reverse this situation. Oh, this is what I really wanted to say about circadian rhythms. Okay, so, our circadian rhythms, when our circadian rhythms are supported, we are actually more adaptive. It's what helps us become more adaptive to the environment that we're in. So, real temperature is a great example of that. So, once you start really supporting your mitochondrial health, but your circadian rhythms, and you start to spend a lot more time outdoors, and you're understanding this whole light code information to the cells, all of that, you start to, or at least I have, I'll just speak for myself and for the clients that I have, right? Less of a problem when the weather changes, especially if it changes rapidly or drastically. So if somebody like me has always been really cold, just always really cold, had thyroid issues, lots of cold, I am now able to tolerate cold much better, but also I'm not that cold when other people are cold now. And that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So we become more adaptive so that we quickly adapt to the environment that we're in, temperature being one thing, but also one of the hallmarks I think of mental health. Well, the hallmark of mental health is feeling of oneness or social interest, is it sometimes called, but I think that is probably the cornerstone of mental health is that we're concerned about others as much as we're concerned about ourselves, that we have a feeling of oneness, a feeling, not just a thought, but a feeling that what I do to you, I do to me. That's the cornerstone of mental health, I think. In addition to that, really important for our mental health is to be adaptive in our behaviors, like physical, mental, and behavioral. What regulates our physical, mental, and behavioral changes within a 24-hour cycle? Our circadian rhythms. So, being able to ride the waves of changes that are coming at you. What I always say about, I mean, I'm not the one that says it, I think it even comes from the recovery world, right? To be able to handle life on life's terms, to live life on life's terms, whatever's coming at you, to be able to handle that and respond versus being really reactive. I have seen that supporting our circadian rhythms and being more in harmony with our natural environment helps us physically, behaviorally, mentally adapt as we're moving through our days. I mean, this is the whole reason that I created the stress management course, is because I realized in the most stressful time of my entire life that I was feeling more stress resilient from these quantum health strategies. I mean, that is phenomenal. I don't even think I would have recognized it if I hadn't been in the middle of such a stressful experience. To go, I cannot believe that I feel grounded and clear, mentally clear, and energized and ready to go on a daily basis, even though this is extremely stressful time. So we see some of that research in meditation, the research on meditation and the way life doesn't necessarily change. But when we become meditators, systematically over time, becoming meditators, that actually helps us respond in life. So life doesn't change, but our response to it changes. And I find the same thing is happening in, but like exponentially greater with the quantum health strategies. So we're just becoming more and more resilient, more and more able to respond in life. Okay, that's what I wanted to say about circadian rhythms. Just driving it home a little bit more. And I will probably just keep doing that because until I start seeing everybody with their blue blockers on, with their windows down, when they're driving, out for sunrise, out for sunset, walking the dog in the mornings, getting whatever you have to do to get some of that light, and being really respectful of darkness. So wearing a sleep mask when you go to sleep or some way to make it really dark, but also wearing your blue blockers at night and getting off of the devices as early as you can after sunset. But then also the timing of eating. So, eating during daylight hours is generally the time to eat. And exercising, there's a time, a window in the morning, which is really good for alertness and for not just focus and alertness, but being able to handle tasks that need a great deal of attention and detailed. If you're doing detailed tasks, there's a time in the morning that's really great for that. Or it could be exercise that's good time for that. Or in the early afternoon is often, at least from a research standpoint, is a generally a good time because that's when the natural rhythms of our system would be ready and alert for that. And that's a good input for timing of day. And that it changes obviously with the seasons, but that is going to be in the mid-afternoon hours. And obviously some people are like, I'm at work, I can't do it then. You do what you can and you adapt as you can adapt. And yeah, we just do the best we can. That's what we do. So food intake, when we exercise, we're generally social creatures more in the evenings when we would have social gathering time for eating. And that is typically before sunset in terms of research. But I just have a lot of people that feel better when they eat right around sunset or just after sunset, especially if they're people who like to eat with the family or eat in social settings. But the problem is we will overeat at times that aren't really good for our circadian rhythms. We tend to overeat or we start craving because of our energy crashes, right? Then we start trying to caffeine and sweets and or numbing with alcohol or whatever it is that we do. But that's all to try and manage these crashes and like surges and crashes that are not natural to our natural rhythms. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. So come check out what we got going on at the Nourished Soul. You can come see at nourished-soul.com. That's the website. And please join me for one of the free classes if you want. And I would love to also have you. The courses you take on your own, but there are Q&A calls with me. So I'd love to see you in one of those too if you're taking the course. Okay. Have a great week, everyone, and I will talk to you on the next episode.